And that is why my time with the gigolo is nothing to be afraid of. In fact, it is an asset. When Carl accused me of loneliness, of desperation, that's just what men do when they meet an independent woman of a certain age. That is the story they want to tell. But don't we become more human because of our mistakes? My brand becomes more valuable as I become more authentic.
Is that it?
Well, I could go on. I mean, I'm a talker.
No. Here's the thing. You were trying to get back with your husband while writing about the wild, sexy freedom of divorce.
A little, yes, we tried a little.
And that was something your readers felt betrayed by. Again, we've done the optics.
The optics?
Yeah, research is over. It's all about optics now, and yours aren't good. How is sleeping with your ex and then lying about it part of a healthy divorce?
Well, it's not unhealthy.
It wasn't divorce.
It is now.
Abby, let me explain.
No, okay, I get it. My story got a little confused lately. But that's divorce. That's life. You're the guys that wanted a slap and always sexy, always happy face on this. But if I embrace everything that has happened to me, and I am ready to, I think that we have something really exciting here. Women in midlife, they just want to be reflected with honesty and compassion. And dare I say it, they are looking for a leader. I am going to be that leader for my generation.
You look incredible. Are you the voice of your generation, as she says?
Right now I have no voice, but I don't know. I mean, it's, I think the nice thing about Abby's character as the voice of a generation is that she is so imperfect, which allows for people to both relate to her on occasion, aspire to be her on occasion, and judge her on other occasions.
I mean, that is a manifesto of a clip to sort of promote the upcoming season, is it not?
True. That's true.
When you watch that clip and you hear Abby talk like that, I mean, is there a part of you that relates to that as a 50-year-old actress who's doing this show?
Yes. I mean, yes. Certainly, I absolutely own my age, and I think it's important to own wherever you're at in life. And part of that is because I'm fortunate enough to be in a great place in my life, a place that you hope to be at when you're in midlife, where I have more responsibility each year as opposed to just slogging it out and sort of fading out. I think it's an incredibly powerful time for a woman, and I'm happy to represent if that's my gig.
Did you notice that your career was,
Trying to figure out the best.
I know it's tough. The director's chairs can be tough at times.
Yeah.
Did you notice as your career was sort of, as it progressed, unlike other kinds of careers, you were gaining more responsibility as an actress as you aged in Hollywood, for lack of a better word?
Yeah,
the industry, that's a better way to put it.
I'm very fortunate that my career I never had a lucky break. I had a lot of good fortune in small ways that it was a nice, easy climb up whatever ladder of success there is. And by the time I got to this position, I felt quite prepared for it. There were moments in my life where things almost happened and didn't happen. And when I look back, I'm grateful that I had more time to develop as an artist and as a person.
Now, when you signed on to Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce, when you first signed on to the first season of the show, was there a fear for you going into it? Because there is an element of the show where it is, and going into this next season even more so, it is very much a no-holds-barred discussion of women at this age. I mean, it is a very empowering discussion at times.
You mean like all the menopause stuff and stuff like that?
Well, in the new season, yeah.
No, I was psyched. I was psyched because it's also a romantic dramedy, right? And I was playing this sexy, vibrant woman who was my age. The first, I mean, we've talked about it before, but the very first message I got from the head of the network was to please not touch my face, which I didn't anyway. But the idea that not only was I playing a woman my age, but I was really owning that age, whatever that means. That I didn't have to pretend to be in a 35-year-old's body.
Is that a rarity in terms of a message from a network to not touch your face?
I've never heard that. I mean, they don't tell you to touch your face, and I think most of the time when women do, it's out of a panic because they feel like they're going to be perceived as too old in some way. But ultimately, I find even when young girls are doing a lot of the things that they're doing to their face, that makes them look older because it makes them look like an indefinable age, and the assumption is that they're much older than they are. And I'm curious to see what those faces will age like because it won't be the same as a face that hasn't been meddled with.
It's so fascinating. I never thought of like the future of young plastic surgery faces.
Or
like
just injection faces, because
Right.
I was talking about this with a facialist who said that she's seeing, you have this whole generation of women who started doing Botox when they were 19, and their facial muscles are paralyzed.
Yep.
So they're sagging in a different way. So age will look different on them, but we will all age should we have the honor of living long enough. But and that's the thing. And so I'm proud to be my age. I feel it's like as you leave the years of your fertility behind, you have all this life experience. You have all this maturity and color to offer the world, and it's an incredibly powerful moment in a woman's life.
So now you get picked up for seasons 3, 4, and 5.
Right.
When we leave Abby at the end of season 2, she's in a bit of a pickle, and she's just gotten her first hot flash, right?
Yes.
She's sort of fired.
She thought she's having a heart attack till she was dying.
Right, but
She was just having
first menopausal hot flash.
Yeah.
Where do we find her now in season 3?
It's right after season 3 begins right after season 2 ends. So she's still really in a very messy place in her own life. But I think Abby, one of the things that I think young women relate to in Abby is that she makes a lot of young mistakes in terms of romance and her vision of her place in the world. In the sense that she got married young, she grew up with her now ex-husband. And when she went back out into the world as a single woman, she did it with a lot of fantasy. And she wanted the world to be a certain way, and the world is not that way. And the longer you hold on to those ideas, sleeping with a hustler and thinking they're not going to hustle you, for example, the longer you want to pretend the world is one way when it's not, the more pain you cause yourself. So I think what happened by the beginning of season 3 is that she's really earnestly beginning to grow up. Everything's fallen apart, and now she's got to figure out how she'd like to move forward in life. And that's what season 3 is about.
Which is kind of perfect for you as an actress going into this, because at this point you've also probably reached that part in doing a show where you're totally comfortable with the character, with how you're going to play her, so you can kind of throw anything at her and feel sort of how you would organically take it on.
It's true. It's really fun for that. And that's true. A third season of a show, which not a lot of shows get to do, is more mature. And not only are you more comfortable in your character, everyone around you is more comfortable. The writers know these people, as they know them as full human beings because they've been on air for several years now. So they write for the actor. They write in a way that is organic to the actor. And it's just been amazing. This has been my favorite year so far, shooting seasons 3, 4, and 5.
Are you shooting seasons 3, 4, and 5 at the same time?
Yes.
That's insane. So
that's why I have no voice.
So congratulations, she was picked up for seasons 3, 4, and 5, which is amazing. Give her a round of applause. But how does it work that you're shooting all 3 of these at the same time? Are you doing 3 and then 4 and then 5 back to back to back?
Yeah, we're shooting them consecutively without shutting down. I think
that's amazing.
It is. And season 5.
It is, but
no, it's tiring, but it's wonderful because you just keep going. You get a rhythm going and you keep going, and I think it's great for storytelling because we know now. At the end of season 5, that's our grand finale, and we know that we have a story to tell that ends there. And
grand finale,
we know that that's our grand finale, and so we will be telling the story towards that end, which will be very satisfying.
So there's no thoughts to being picked up for a 6th season? You guys are thinking that the 5th season is the end season?
They own us till the end of the 5th season. So if there were to be a 6th season, that would be a whole other story. Yeah, so the way we're approaching storytelling this time is like we are telling seasons 3, 4, and 5.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So now you're coming into Girlfriend's Guide after being on House and then having a part on The Good Wife, but this is really the first time that you sort of had a show that you were front and center the star of. Was that a nerve-wracking experience for you going into it? What was the, if you can tell us, what was the development process like in that, or had it already been developed and then you jumped on?
It had already been developed. Marty, I knew socially because her brother is one of my husband's best friends. And she had told me about this project she was doing, and I put it out of my head because so many things happen between somebody developing a project and it actually getting made. And then she called me when the show was greenlit. And
had she told you about it in the hopes of like saying like there's something?
She asked me if I would be interested in something like that, and I said yeah. And she told me, and when the show got greenlit, she told me again that it was happening. But then, of course, there was the list of however many really famous people they wanted to try first. So I had to wait for them to say no. And then, but Marty knew, she had a vision, she knew she wanted me for this job, and it was just like everything, we had to play that whole story out. And then,
is that one of the things where she tells you, look, the network wants us to go after these 10 famous people, but we know that
she never told me that. I just knew what was happening. And it's annoying, but it is what it is, you know. And then luckily it all worked out, and it's a part that I've been able to, that's been able to grow with me. And she really had a vision of me in this role, and it's just been an incredible opportunity. And as a boss, I wrote an episode in season 3. I'm directing an episode in season 5. So creatively, it's like I'm forever expanding. With her as a mentor.
So with that, when they signed on for seasons 3, 4, and 5, did you also come in and say, well, I would love to be more a part of the writer's room and help with my character?
I'm a producer in these seasons now, and yes. And
what is that like?
It's another reason why I love and own being 50 years old. I have been doing this for 30 years, and it's one of those wonderful situations where experience has counted, and I get to do more and use more of my brain and participate on a deeper level and learn about all sides of storytelling. That's all it is. I love what I do. I don't want to not be an actor. I just want to know more. Yeah. I want to know more and do more and create more, and I take advantage of every opportunity to do that.
Did you have any insecurities sort of going into the writer's room as the star of the show and sort of not stepping on anyone's toes and sort of just listening at first? Or were you, I've got a notepad of ideas, guys, and I want to share them with everybody?
Well, you sort of jump into an existing conversation, right? They're breaking down the whole season, they're breaking down each episode, they're breaking down each scene in each episode, and you join in that conversation. And they invited me in as an actor before I co-wrote last year, and Marty just loves to have input from the people that she hires. She's not afraid of other people's ideas. She celebrates the talent that she hires. It's just a very good situation like that. It's not always like that, but in this case, I was very comfortable.
So what was directing like? Was this the first time
you directed?
I haven't done it yet. Oh, you haven't done it yet?
I'm directing in season 5.
Are you nervous?
I am. I mean, season 5 is in like 3 weeks, so I'm nervous, but I'm in an environment that is like, I feel like I'm in graduate school. You know, the whole crew and we have a wonderful relationship with everybody there, and I've really, you know, all the directors give me pointers. And
oh, what kind of pointers have they given you, if you don't mind me asking?
Just the way they break a scene down, the way they pre-plan how to be, what kind of organization you need before you get on set, and as pre-planned as you are, how to be loose about it, how to still allow inspiration to come into the room.
Have you tried to pick an episode that you're sort of in a little less of so that you can direct more, or are you still?
Had nothing. They've made that schedule. Yeah. We picked 503 because it's close to the end, and that way I can do some post-production on it. And we had a winter break, which I was supposed to get some rest in, but as you can hear, I didn't get enough. So yeah, it'll be great. I'm really looking forward to it.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now you say you know you've had a career for about 30 years, and I was talking to you about this in the green room, and it's the most fascinating thing to me, which is that in the early 90s, late 80s, you are referenced as a
mid-80s.
Mid-80s, excuse me. You are referenced as a club kid with James St. James, who is the author of the book Disco Bloodbath. I don't know if anybody knows. It's the sort of story of Michael Alec and the club kids. But before Alec, you were...
Well, Michael was already around. He was a kid. But none of that had happened yet. It was before Disco 2000.
How did you get into the club scene? And how did you become Lisa E?
I grew up in New Jersey. I hated it there in a great way. I hated it in a great way. And I say that meaning I didn't see anything around me that inspired me in terms of what I wanted to be or where I wanted to be. And so I hated it in a great way because it gave me the fire and the impetus to get the fuck out and do something with my life. And so, you know, being so close to the city, I was taking dance class in the city since I was 14 and, you know, taking the bus in, started clubbing at that age. And when I finally was done with high school and moved into the city, I met James in an elevator in a dorm, and we started to really go out and religiously. But the world at that time downtown was like, it was at the very beginnings of the AIDS crisis. It really hadn't hit full steam ahead at that point. And so it was an incredibly colorful world filled with beautiful, weird freaks, and I was just so excited to see people that didn't live by the rules and had incredible intellect and incredible talent that wasn't commercial enough to sell anywhere else, that this whole microcosm existed. I mean, the thing that millennials and later what they missed is the possibility of a microcosm, a true microcosm, because now everything is everywhere immediately.
And that's the thing that I've always found so fascinating about the club kids in that era, is that maybe there was some after that, but it feels to me like that was the sort of the last bastion of like a subculture that wasn't bought by corporate media in any way. That wasn't immediately funneled into something.
Things were constantly stolen from that culture and then made into, you know, fashion designers love to hang out in there and see what's happening and then turn it into something that you sell. But yeah.
Like grunge, where it was like suddenly it was, you know, it could sell CDs in Starbucks or whatever was Starbucks at that time.
Right.
It just was what it was, and then it
and
died.
It only existed here.
Yeah.
And there was another world in Berlin, and there was another world in San Francisco, but the world that was and it was only downtown. It was a very specific little microcosm, and it was, for me as a kid, it was so exciting. I didn't know who anybody was, honestly, and I didn't care. What I cared about was the incredible creativity and weirdness, and it was what I had been missing. Growing up in the suburbs, and I was embarrassed about being from the suburbs. I wanted my mind to be blown, and it was being blown in that world. And then Maureen Dowd did this New York Times article called Lisa in Wonderland, and I had been at that point, like, for whatever reason, I became this celebrity for no reason, and I don't know why that happened. I was like super enthusiastic about everything, and I didn't particularly have a sense of style. I wore the clothes I had from high school. I didn't have any money. I didn't even have a coat. But I think it was just that I was so excited to be there that like truly just out of my mind psyched, that made me into this creature. And so she wrote this article called Lisa in Wonderland. And it is what it is, the article. She was very kind. She was very careful to not ruin my life. And I was...
Not what a lot of people could say about Maureen Dowd.
Right. She was very kind. And I was also very careful because my grandparents were alive, and I knew people would be reading this article. And so I was very careful to limit my own exposure. But what I didn't understand at that age was that when the New York Times Magazine is published, it's published everywhere. My phone number and my home address were listed. So the day that came out, I got 30 stalkers, minimum. And I was a teenager. I had no protection. I didn't know anything about the world at that level, on that scale. And I was really on my own with that. And it was like, in those days we had just gotten phone message machines with tape cassettes, and you could call from a payphone, but you couldn't control it. You just had to listen to each message. And how dirty can I be on this?
Go for it.
I'd literally have to wait for someone to finish jerking off so I could hear the next message. And it was over and over, so I'd be standing on like 42nd Street and 9th Avenue in between class, like having to listen to Somebody raped my photograph so that I could get to the next message. So
Don't mean to laugh. I'm sorry.
Right? No. Well, whatever.
The
It's
phrase "rape my photograph" got me though.
yeah. I mean, I say it with humor because I can remember it as a grown up and appreciate how ridiculous the situation was. But it was a great lesson for me because it was the day I realized that if I wanted to be an actor, because I always wanted to be an actor, but if I wanted to be an actor to be famous, then I needed to rethink what I wanted to do because fame, and this is something I think people need to hear, especially with social media, fame is not a goal. And in fact, it's not even a power. It takes away your personal power in the world in a way that's quite unique. You no longer own your image. You no longer even own your actions. People can say what they think you meant. People can say what they wish you did. And if it goes out quickly enough, there's no controlling it. And so I took a step back and really looked at my goals and reassessed. And of course, this is always what I wanted to do. And I ended up disappearing completely from that scene and writing a musical about the AIDS crisis. And that's why. And the funny thing is, because I had been famous for no reason as a kid, 2 years later, when I'm now a whopping 20 years old, I had an audience for this play and I could get it done at a wonderful theater because we knew people would come.
Lisa in Wonderland's play, right? Is that what you mean?
Well, yes, because there was a built-in audience. People would buy tickets. So I did a little workshop at La Mama, and then Ellen Stewart Reed encouraged me, and over the next year I rewrote it, and we did a full production at La Mama, which was an amazing place.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And then, this is going to be a horrible segue, but when did you get cast in Seinfeld?
Seinfeld, well, so after the play, I ended up on MTV, a really incredibly
You had a show, right?
Yeah,
Awake?
so stupid. Awake on the Wild Side.
It's such an early 90s MTV title.
So early 90s, it's hilarious.
Welcome to Awake on the Wild Side.
Wild Side, yeah. And it was also a great place because my co-host and I, we had no chemistry whatsoever. Like, there was literally nothing going on. And so it was very hard to sort of like ramp up into making things funny. And eventually we figured out something or other, but it didn't last that long. But it taught me a lot, and I got paid, and it was my first paycheck, and that was very exciting. And then I ended up in LA, and about a year after I moved to LA, so it was probably like 92 or 93 that I did Seinfeld.
Now that's a New York show with many New York writers there. Were any of them aware of the Maureen Dowd story, or did any of them know about your past in that regard?
I don't think so. I think they were already in LA when all of that was going on. But I don't know. I really was so oblivious to how my past followed me in any way.
And outside of Susan, George's fiance, you were the most reoccurring girlfriend of George's on
I
the
suppose
show.
I only did two episodes.
I think that's the most reoccurring girlfriend of George's.
Except for the one
show.
that had 11 episodes or something.
Oh, really?
She died. Or
That's Susan.
Yeah,
That's the fiance.
Yeah.
What was it like doing that show? I mean, you're very funny. If you guys don't remember, she is in the episode where George accuses her of faking an orgasm and throws him out of bed.
My grandmother was very upset when she saw that. She thought we really were naked under the covers. She just didn't quite understand that I was like fully clothed. Anyway, it was a trip. You know, they were at the height of their celebrity when I did that show, and I think there was a lot of pressure on everybody, so it was a little bit of an awkward energy in the room, but it was so incredibly exciting to be on that show.
Oh, and you have Jennifer Coolidge in one of the scenes that you're in.
The second episode that I did, it was me and Jennifer Coolidge. Jennifer Coolidge taught me how to make a face that looks like you've had lip injections and Botox.
Can I see?
I'm going to try. And then you have to talk without moving anything. You just talk like that.
It's like
Jennifer Coolidge.
It's kind of scared, but at the same time vacant. Like it's really...
Everything's frozen, and you can't move anything above your... you can only move your lower jaw.
It just looks like
And
someone
you have to look a little bit surprised.
who's terrified that this is the only face that they can make. Like they know that that's all that's
No,
there.
they don't know. They don't know they're not making other facial expressions. They think they're making a lot of facial expressions.
Let's open it up to the audience for some questions. Who has some questions out there?
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
I'm curious to know, I've heard a lot recently in the media and on news and even on my personal Facebook, people saying that entertainers should only do one thing, and that is entertain. And knowing that you have a history of using your voice to fight for social issues and things like that, I'm curious what you would say to something like that.
Well, it's really a time, isn't it, right now? And it's a very tricky moment. There's a lot of backlash. I think everyone has a right to speak their mind, period, end of story. If you are a human being, you have a right to speak your mind. I think if you do it with intention and intelligence, then that's what you should be doing. I think it's wrong to say that somebody who has a microphone put in their face shouldn't speak, but it's also fine to disagree with them. So it's allows, I think social media allows for people to behave in ways they would never behave face to face. It's so upsetting to me what that experience is like. You know, we're both obligated, expected, and then punished for having an opinion. But then, so it's hard to know when to act and when not to act. So I think ultimately you have to get to the point where you have to be very careful about when you choose to say something that is meaningful and powerful, and wait, and just wait for a minute and wait till it matters. I don't know how else to put
Do
that.
you feel like we're listening, not to piggyback on this and dig too deep into it, but do you feel like we as a culture listen too much to the voices on, for lack of a better word, social media or in other places?
Yeah, I don't even know.
We say something like say you said something here and say you said something articulate and beautiful and powerful and from an activist standpoint, and instead of people who are educated writing articles about it and people who care about it talking about it, we suddenly said, well, the Twitterverse is in an uproar about this. It's like, who cares? That's just random yahoos talking about it.
Or not even people.
Right. Bots.
The question really becomes, what is social media for?
Yeah.
I mean, I know for work, I know what social media is for. It's for, hey, tune in tomorrow night, our show is premiering, right? For politics, I'm not sure anymore, because having experienced the backlash of that, it's so violent and vile, and I don't know honestly what the good part of it is.
Something feels like it has to give.
Right. So then when you ask me, is it important to have a voice, or do we have a right to have a voice? Of course, everyone has a right to have a voice. But is that the right use of your voice? Is it, quietly supporting organizations that mean something to you, that's having a voice. And sometimes in the position that we're in, because we're representing larger corporations, we're selling things, it's the only option we have. And so it's tricky, because then you don't want to feel like the world is falling apart and you're talking about your premiere. But at the same time, what is social media making a difference? Does it really carry any power beyond action and reaction just within the social media verse?
And at the same time, I will not labor on this too long, when the world is falling apart and you're talking about your premiere, people have a hard time recognizing that that is the same thing as the world is falling apart and I'm going to my job, doing my job, whatever my job is. That is actually your vocation and your trade,
right.
And your job, to act, to make a show,
Right, it's really challenging time. It's a really challenging time. I have to remember, and it's hard for me to remember, that I represent a larger corporation. And so that's really what the wall that I run into. Like, I don't know how to have a voice, my true voice, and also represent this larger corporation who is not just for people with my voice, who's for people with many voices. Certainly vile attacks on individuals are never acceptable. I got a very sweet note from what's her face? God, now I've forgotten her. I can't even tell you. I won't tell you that story because her name has just slipped out of my brain.
We'll come back to it. We'll
Yeah.
go to another question.
But yes.
Next question.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for coming. So you mentioned that last season you had the opportunity to co-write I was wondering if during this season, did you ever see your character moving in a direction that you didn't necessarily agree with? And if so, how did you change it?
Actually, this season I wrote my own episode. Last year I co-wrote, and this year I wrote a whole episode, which is very exciting. But you know, when I get a script, or if I've been in the writer's room and I'm seeing what's happening, I have an absolute voice in the process. And if there's something that really bothers me, I'm open to call Marty or some of the writers and talk about it. And that's unique to this job. I haven't had that experience on other jobs. And I'm quite grateful for it. That's what I mean. It's like, that's that feeling where not only was I hired, but I feel appreciated and I feel celebrated, and I am used in the best sense for all of the abilities that I'm willing to apply to this job.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
So I know you're on House.
Yes.
So I wanted to know what was one of your favorite moments on House, and would you ever do like a show like that again, based around like medical doctors and things?
I loved doing a medical show. It's kind of, the hardest thing about a show like that is the procedural aspect of it. So especially in the role that I had, I did a lot of episodes where I'd be like, House, need you. And that would be like my whole episode. And so that can get a little boring. Luckily on that show, I also ended up with a romantic storyline, so there was a little bit more to play. I loved when I got the opportunity to do the whole Cuddy episode. That was really exciting for me because it was the biggest episode I'd ever done in my career. And I felt really honored that I had that opportunity. And it was also fun because for that week, it was basically my show, and I could, with my whole crew, I was with them the most, more than I had been with them on any other episode. So it was really wonderful. And I loved the writer's room on that show. I learned a lot, and there's so many smart people, and a lot of them are still my friends to this day. Thank you.
Lisa, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure talking to you. When is the premiere of season 3 of The Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce?
Why, it happens to be this Wednesday.
This Wednesday.
January 11th. Yes, 10 p.m. Eastern.
Lisa Edelstein, thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.